The Pinnacle Museum of Lost Dominions was, in a word, excessive. Gia stood in the main atrium, craning her neck to take in the vaulted ceilings that stretched up, up into what might as well have been infinity. Holographic displays floated everywhere, showing extinct species doing extinct things in extinct languages that nobody alive could speak anymore. Very uplifting stuff. Real cheerful way to spend an afternoon. She checked her comm for the third time in as many minutes. Still 2 hours until her ship cleared inspection. 2 hours of mandatory waiting, while some bureaucrat with too many appendages poked around the Mockingbird, looking for cargo violations that didn't exist. Well, mostly didn't exist. That crate in Hold 3 was technically pharmaceutical supplies, and if the inspector didn't ask too many questions about why pharmaceutical supplies needed to be stored in lead-lined containers, everyone could go home happy. So here she was, killing time in a museum. Because, apparently, the universe had a sense of humor, and that sense of humor was terrible. Gia wandered past a display about the Mothkari, a crystalline species that communicated through light refraction and had apparently built an empire spanning 200 star systems before imploding in what the placard delicately called philosophical differences, which was museum speak for they all killed each other over something stupid. She'd hauled Mothkari artifacts before, back when she didn't ask questions about manifests. Pretty stuff, but it always hummed in a way that made her teeth ache. Next up, the Dullnecks, hive-mind species. Looked like ambulatory coral reefs, thought with one collective consciousness, and vanished overnight about 1,000 cycles ago. Nobody knew why. One day they were there, building megastructures and composing symphonies that required 600 individuals to perform. Next day, gone. Every single one of them. The display showed a hologram of their empty cities, perfectly preserved, waiting for occupants who would never return. Cheerful. So very cheerful. Gia checked her comm again. 1 hour, 58 minutes. This was going to be a long wait. She drifted through galleries with the enthusiasm of someone attending their own autopsy. The Obraxis Dominion, aquatic warriors who'd conquered half the outer bands before their homeworld sun went supernova. The Keth Collective, energy beings who'd supposedly transcended physical form and then, well, nobody knew what happened after that. Transcended right out of existence, apparently. The museum was full of other visitors, mostly aliens with too much money and too much time. A family of Quilnari, tall, furred bipeds with 6 eyes, gathered around a display, their younglings chattering in high-pitched chirps. A pair of what looked like sentient gas clouds in containment suits floated past, their translation boxes emitting polite commentary about artistic movements nobody alive practiced anymore. Gia felt profoundly out of place. She was a cargo hauler. Her idea of culture was deciding which freeze-dried meal packet tasted least like recycled boot leather. She wore coveralls with oil stains that wouldn't come out no matter how many times she ran them through the cleaner. Her boots had magnetic soles for zero-G work and made an embarrassing clanking sound on the museum's polished floors. She should leave. Find a bar, nurse a drink that would probably cost more than her ship's fuel budget, and wait out the inspection like a normal person. But something made her keep walking. Maybe boredom. Maybe the part of her that used to be curious about things, back before life became a series of cargo manifests and fuel calculations and trying to stay ahead of her debts. She turned a corner into a smaller gallery, dimly lit compared to the others. The sign above the entrance read, "The Phantom Sovereignty, an empire lost to time." Catchy name. Probably meant it was extra boring. The gallery was almost empty, just her and an elderly Praxian couple examining a display case near the far wall. Gia wandered in, hands shoved in her pockets, not expecting much. The first display showed fragmented star charts, the kind of thing that made sense only if you had a degree in ancient cartography and too much patience. She moved past it. Next, pieces of what might have been armor, or maybe just decorative metalwork. Hard to tell with extinct civilizations. Half the time, their ceremonial tableware looked like weapons, and their actual weapons looked like modern art. Then she saw it. Her feet stopped moving. Her breath stopped working. Her entire world narrowed down to a single point. A banner, torn and faded, suspended in a preservation field. On that banner was a crest, a hawk, wings spread, clutching twin stars in its talons. The Dumont crest, her father's crest, her family's crest. Gia's hand went to her throat, where a small pendant hung beneath her shirt. She pulled it out with numb fingers. The pendant was old, scuffed, the chain replaced 3 times over the years. But the design was unmistakable. A hawk clutching twin stars. Identical. Her eyes snapped to the placard below the banner. She read it once, then again, because the first time her brain rejected the information as impossible. Military standard of the Phantom Sovereignty, an aggressive, expansionist empire that vanished approximately 300 cycles ago. Origin and fate unknown. Artifacts recovered from the Umbral Reach, Sector 88 Delta. 300 cycles. Her father had died 16 years ago. 16 years last month, to be exact. Mining accident in the belt, they'd told her. Quick and painless, they'd said, which was probably a lie, but a kind one. She'd been 12, and her world had ended in a burst transmission from her father's corporate overseer. But this crest, this exact crest, was supposedly from an empire that fell 3 centuries ago? Gia moved to the next. Display case, her heart hammering. Uniform fragments, the fabric preserved in stasis. The cut was military, no question. Rank insignia she didn't recognize, but the basic design language was human. Pockets in practical places, reinforced shoulders for carrying weight, boots designed for human feet, not the dozens of other configurations that filled the galaxy. Weapons, not ceremonial ones. These were tools meant for killing. The design was sleek, efficient, human practical. She'd seen similar configurations in historical databases, the kind of thing her father had shown her when she was young and curious about his military service. Because her father had been military once, before the mining job, before the accident. Navigation charts, using stellar designations that made her skin crawl with recognition. Those weren't alien systems. Those were human cataloging systems, the kind the Exploration Corps used for mapping new territory. Her hands were shaking. She photographed everything, her comms camera clicking quietly. The banner, the uniform, the weapons, the charts, every single piece. A voice startled her, high and musical. Fascinating display, is it not? Gia turned to find something that looked like a jellyfish had achieved sentience and decided to work in customer service. The alien floated at roughly head height, translucent body pulsing with bioluminescent patterns, multiple tendrils trailing beneath it. A translation disc hovered nearby, converting the creature's light patterns into speech. "I'm Phlox, gallery attendant," the voice continued, cheerful and profoundly unhelpful. "The Phantom Sovereignty exhibit has been quite popular since its opening last month. Such mystery, such intrigue. Nobody knows what happened to them." Gia forced her face into something resembling neutral interest. "Last month? This just opened?" "Oh, yes. Brand new installation. The artifacts were discovered quite recently, you see. Only been in our possession for 6 months. Still cataloging many items. Phlox bobbed enthusiastically, tendrils waving. Are you interested in extinct civilizations? We have an excellent lecture series on Thursdays. Where exactly were these found? Gia kept her voice casual, just another curious tourist. The Umbral Reach, it said? Oh my, yes. Dreadfully dangerous region of space. Forbidden zone, actually. The Galactic Council has declared it off-limits for, must be 80 cycles now? Maybe 90? Terrible gravitational anomalies, you understand? Ships go in, ships don't come out. Very hazardous. But these artifacts came out. Well, yes. There was a special scientific expedition, heavily authorized, very hush-hush. They retrieved what they could from the outer edges and left quickly. Safety protocols, you understand. Phlox drifted closer, lowering their voice to what probably passed for conspiratorial among their species. Between you and me, I think there's much more out there, but the Council won't authorize another expedition. Too risky, they say. Gia nodded, mind racing. Do you know anything else about this phantom sovereignty? Where they came from? What they wanted? Oh, the mystery is part of the appeal. The placard tells you everything we know, I'm afraid. They appeared. They expanded aggressively. They vanished. Poof! Phlox made a gesture with their tendrils that might have been meant to indicate sudden disappearance. Gone without a trace. Well, except for these traces. But you know what I mean. Right, thanks. Enjoy the rest of your visit. Don't forget to stop by the gift shop on your way out. Phlox floated away to bother someone else, leaving Gia alone with her spiraling thoughts. She turned back to the banner, to the crest that had hung in her father's study for her entire childhood. He'd told her it was old family symbolism, passed down through generations. A reminder of where they came from, he'd said. A reminder to aim high and hold tight to what mattered. He'd never said it was from a 300-cycle-old empire. Because it wasn't. It couldn't be. Gia pulled up her comm, accessing files she kept in encrypted storage. Personal files. Things she'd never been able to throw away, even when keeping them hurt. There, a photo of her father, taken 2 years before his death. He stood in front of his mining vessel, the Prospect, grinning at the camera with that lopsided smile she'd inherited. And there, on his jacket, a patch, small, discreet, the hawk and twin stars. She zoomed in, compared it to the banner in front of her. Identical. Her father had died 16 years ago. These artifacts were supposedly 300 cycles old. Someone was lying. Either the museum's dating was catastrophically wrong, or someone had deliberately falsified the timeline. But why? Gia checked her comm. 1 hour, 30 minutes until her ship cleared inspection. Plans changed. She wasn't going back to the Mockingbird, not yet. She needed answers, and those answers started with whoever had curated this exhibit. She photographed the placard, noting the curator's name. Dr. Coram, Chief Archaeologist of Extinct Civilizations. Time to have a chat with the good doctor. But first, she needed to go back to her ship's storage, to the locked box she kept in the captain's quarters. The box she hadn't opened in years because opening it meant remembering, and remembering hurt too much. Inside that box was her father's personal effects. The things they'd sent back after the accident. His insignia. His personal logs. His locket. The locket with the Dumont crest engraved on the front. Gia took one last look at the banner, committing every detail to memory. Then she turned and walked out of the gallery, her magnetic boots clanking against polished floors, her mind racing with impossible questions. Her father, had kept secrets. Big ones. And Gia was going to find out why. The Mockingbird looked even worse than usual in the harsh, docking lights of Helix Prime. Gia had never been one for sentimentality about her ship, but seeing it surrounded by sleek passenger liners and corporate transports really hammered home how far down the economic ladder she'd fallen. The hull patches had patches. The paint job was less color scheme and more history of every cargo she'd ever hauled, written in stains. But it was hers, and more importantly, it had storage. Gia bypassed the main hold where the inspector, a bored-looking Quilnari with a datapad and an attitude, was still poking around. She headed straight for the captain's quarters, a generous term for what was basically a closet with a bunk and delusions of adequacy. The locked box sat exactly where she'd left it, shoved under the bunk behind a crate of emergency rations that had expired 2 years ago. She pulled it out, her hands steadier now than they'd been in the museum. Anger had a way of burning through shock, and she was getting angrier by the minute. The lock responded to her thumbprint. Inside, a folded uniform jacket. Too big for her then, still too big for her now. A set of military insignia she'd never understood. A data chip containing personal logs she'd watched exactly once before. The grief became too much. And the locket. Gia picked it up, the metal warm in her palm. She'd worn it as a kid, right up until the day the accident report came through. Then she'd put it away and tried to forget. She opened it. 2 photos. One of her mother, dead from illness when Gia was 6. One of Gia herself, maybe 10 years old, grinning gap-toothed at the camera. And engraved on the inside cover, the hawk and twin stars, exactly like the banner in the museum. She photographed it, added it to her growing collection of evidence that nothing made sense anymore. The data chip called to her. She'd avoided it for 16 years, but avoiding things had stopped being an option about an hour ago. Gia plugged it into her comm, pulled up the files. Her father's voice filled the small cabin, and she had to sit down on the bunk because her legs stopped working. Personal log, Lionel. Mining vessel prospect. Cycle date 449993. Routine patrol of Belt Sector 9. She skipped through entries. Mundane stuff. Ore yields. Equipment maintenance. Complaints about corporate policy. The ordinary life of an ordinary mining captain. Then she hit the entries from the month before his death. Personal log. I can't record what I saw today. If anyone accessed this, but I need to document it somewhere. The coordinates were right. The readings were right. But command says it's a navigation error. Tells me to delete my logs and forget about it. How do you forget something like that? Gia's breath caught. She'd never made it this far into the logs before. Personal log. They're transferring me. New assignment, they say. Better pay, they say. But I know a silencing when I see one. I got too close to something I wasn't supposed to see. The question is what? And more importantly, why does it matter 16 years after? The log cut off mid-sentence. The next entry was dated 3 days before his death. Personal log. Gia, if you're hearing this, if something happens to me, I need you to know I love you. More than anything, what I'm about to do, I'm doing because it matters. Because some things are bigger than one person. I can't explain more. Not here, not like this. Just know that whatever they tell you, whatever story they give you, I died doing something important. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The log ended. Gia sat in the silence of her cabin, her father's voice echoing in her head. She played it again. Then again. He'd known. He'd known something was going to happen. His death wasn't an accident. She cross-referenced the dates. The museum said the artifacts were discovered 6 months ago. Her father died 16 years ago. The exhibit claimed the phantom sovereignty fell 300 cycles ago. None of it lined up. Unless the museum's timeline was a lie. Gia grabbed her comm, started pulling up everything she could find on the umbral reach. Public records were sparse, mostly navigational warnings and hazard advisories. But she'd learned a long time ago that public records were for people who followed rules. She pinged an old contact, someone who owed her a favor. Or maybe she owed them a favor. The debt economy in her line of work got complicated. The response came back in minutes. Restricted database access, limited time window, don't ask questions. Gia didn't ask questions. She just downloaded everything she could find. Classified expedition reports, surveillance data, incident logs, and there, buried in a file marked Historical Anomalies, references to human exploration missions into the umbral reach. Missions dated 16 years ago. Her father's name appeared in 3 separate documents, all heavily redacted. But his name was there, clear as day, associated with special reconnaissance operations in the Forbidden Zone. Lionel wasn't a mining captain when he died. Or if he was, that wasn't the whole story. The inspector's voice crackled over the ship's comm. Inspection complete. You're cleared for departure. Try to keep your cargo legal next time. Gia barely heard it. She was too busy tracing the credentials of the museum's curator, this Dr. Corim, who'd put together an exhibit full of lies and half-truths. His office was listed in the museum's public directory. Visiting hours ended in 20 minutes. Perfect. Dr. Corim's office was exactly what Gia expected. Organized chaos. 4 desks arranged in a square, because apparently having 4 arms meant you needed 4 separate workspaces. Each desk buried under data pads, artifact fragments, holographic displays showing archaeological sites from a dozen different worlds. The doctor himself was a Praxian, tall and reptilian, with scales that shifted from green to blue, depending on the light. All 4 of his hands were busy. 2 typing, 1 holding a cup of something that smelled like burnt plastic, 1 gesturing at a hologram of what looked like ancient pottery. He glanced up when Gia walked in, one eye ridge raising. We're closed. Visiting hours ended. He checked a chronometer. 3 minutes ago. Good thing I'm not visiting. Gia shut the door behind her. I'm here about your Phantom Sovereignty exhibit. Ah, wonderful! Did you enjoy it? We worked very hard on the display design, really tried to capture the mystery of where did the artifacts really come from? Corim blinked, all 4 hands pausing mid-motion. The placard clearly states the Umbral Reach, Sector 88 Delta, Scientific Expedition, authorized by... Gia pulled out her comm, displayed the photo of the banner next to the photo of her father's locket. Explain this. Corim leaned closer, his scales shifting to a darker blue. He studied the images, 2 hands setting down their work, the other 2 zooming in on details. Where did you get this? My father, who died 16 years ago wearing this exact crest. Not 300 cycles ago, 16 years. The curator's expression shifted from academic interest to something that looked like fear, then excitement, then back to fear. Close the door. It's already closed. Lock it. Gia locked it. Corim set down his cup, all 4 hands coming together in what might have been a gesture of prayer or possibly panic. Your father. His name? Lionel. And you are? Gia. And before you ask, yes, I can prove it. Yes, this is real. And yes, I want answers. Corim paced, his tail swishing behind him in agitation. I've been waiting for something like this, hoping for it, dreading it. Do you know what it's like to build your entire career on lies? Can't say that I do. I haul cargo. Pretty straightforward work. The dating is wrong, Karim said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Deliberately wrong. The artifacts aren't 300 cycles old. They're recent. Some of them are barely 20 years old. So why lie? Because the Galactic Council panicked. Coram pulled up a holographic display, showing star charts of the umbral reach. 16 years ago, there was an incident. A Council survey ship detected energy signatures in the Forbidden Zone. Power generation, communications, life support systems, not ancient ruins, active installations. Gia's blood went cold. Human installations. Yes, humanity was supposed to be young, primitive, confined to known space. A few colonies, some mining operations, nothing significant. But this suggested something else entirely. A hidden presence. Military-grade infrastructure. Possibly hostile. What did they do? They sent in an expedition, heavily armed, prepared for combat. What they found? Coram pulled up images of artifacts identical to what Gia had seen in the museum. They found evidence of a massive human operation, bases, weapon platforms, technology that shouldn't exist. And then, nothing. Everyone was gone. Evacuated, they assumed, or moved deeper into the reach. And the Council buried it. They fabricated the 300-cycle timeline to avoid panic, classified the real findings, turned it into a historical curiosity instead of an active threat. Karim's scales had gone fully dark now. I've been compiling real evidence for years, secret files, unauthorized analysis. I know I'm risking everything, but the truth matters. Show me. Coram hesitated, then pulled up restricted files. Fragmented transmissions from the umbral reach. Energy signatures consistent with human settlements. Active power generation. And there, buried in a file marked Audio Intercepts, Unverified. A transmission fragment. He played it. Static, interference, the crackling hiss of long-distance communication through impossible obstacles. Then a voice, distorted but unmistakable. Gia's hands gripped the edge of the desk. That was her father's voice. The transmission lasted 8 seconds. 8 seconds of static, choked audio that turned Gia's world inside out for the second time in one day. Bastion 9 to command. We have confirmation of outer perimeter. Holding position until Dumont out. Dumont. Her father's voice saying their family name, 16 years after he was supposed to be dead. Gia played it again. Then again. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. They'd moved past shaking into some kind of numb autopilot. When was this recorded? Her voice came out flat, emotionless. Shock did that sometimes, stripped everything down to basics. Coram checked the file metadata, 2 hands scrolling through data while the other 2 nervously rearranged items on his desk. The transmission was intercepted 11 years ago, 5 years after the official record says your father died. Play it again. He did. Gia closed her eyes, listening past the static, past the distortion. That was him. The cadence, the slight rasp in his voice from years of breathing recycled ship air. The way he pronounced consonants just a bit too sharp. A habit from his military days. Her father had been alive 11 years ago. Maybe longer, maybe still. There's more, Coram said quietly. He pulled up additional files, his movements cautious like he was handling explosives. Energy signatures from multiple installations. Bastion 9 is just one designation we've identified. There are others. Bastion 3, Bastion 11, Bastion 16, all in the umbral reach, all maintaining minimal power output. We estimate there could be dozens. A whole network. Yes, and all human. Corim displayed a chart showing power consumption patterns. These aren't research stations or mining colonies. The energy profiles match military installations. Weapons platforms, long-range sensors, defensive systems designed to stay hidden and stay operational for decades. Gia stared at the data, her mind racing through implications. Humanity built a secret military empire in forbidden space, and nobody noticed? Oh, people noticed. The Council noticed 16 years ago, investigated, and then decided that pretending it was ancient history was safer than admitting a young species had outmaneuvered them. Corim's scales flickered with what might have been amusement. Your species has a talent for surprise. If my father was there 11 years ago, there might be records, station logs, personnel databases. Gia leaned over the desk, studying the star charts. You said Bastion 9. Do you have coordinates? Approximate ones. The umbral reach is a sensor nightmare. Gravitational anomalies, nebula interference, naturally occurring wormhole fragments. Getting exact positions is nearly impossible without being there in person. So let's go there in person. Corim's 4 eyes widened. All 4 hands stopped moving simultaneously. Absolutely not. The region is forbidden for good reason. Ships that enter the reach don't come back. The anomalies alone would tear most vessels apart, and that's before accounting for any automated defenses these installations might have. You just said there are ways through. The Council expedition made it in and out. They had military-grade shielding and a fleet of support vessels. You have a cargo hauler that looks like it's held together with optimism and faith. The Mockingbird is sturdier than she looks. Gia crossed her arms. And I'm going whether you help me or not. Question is whether you want to come along and actually see the discovery of your career, or stay here cataloging lies. Corim made a sound like air escaping from a punctured seal. He paced the length of his office, tail swishing in agitation. This is insane. I'm a scholar, not an explorer. I study dead civilizations from the safety of climate-controlled galleries. This civilization might not be dead. That's the whole point. Which makes it infinitely more dangerous. Gia pulled up the transmission fragment on her own comm, played her father's voice one more time. He was there, doing something important enough to fake his death and abandon his 12-year-old daughter. I need to know what, and I need to know why. If there's even a chance he's still alive. She stopped, forced down the hope that wanted to choke her. Hope was dangerous. Hope made you stupid. But it was there anyway, burning in her chest like a reactor core. Corim stopped pacing. He looked at Gia, really looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. You understand, this is almost certainly a one-way trip. The odds of successfully navigating the reach, finding the installation, and returning are not good. I've made worse bets. Have you? No, Gia admitted. But I'm making this one anyway. The curator was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled up a new display, showing technical specifications and sensor arrays. I have access to certain resources. Funding for research expeditions, equipment that might allow us to survive the journey. And I've been analyzing the energy signatures for years. I know patterns the Council expedition missed. So you're in? I'm going to regret this. Corim's scales shifted to a resigned shade of gray-green. But yes, I'm in. Not because I think we'll succeed, but because I've spent my entire career studying the dead. Just once, I'd like to study the living. When can we leave? It will take time to prepare. We need to modify your ship, install proper shielding, Upgrade your sensor arrays. At least 2 weeks, maybe 3. Gia shook her head. We leave in 3 days. Every day we wait is another day the trail gets colder. 3 days isn't enough time to... Then we work fast. Gia stood, her decision made. You handle the equipment. I'll handle the ship. We meet at docking bay 12 in 72 hours, ready to go. Karim looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Gia's expression must have convinced him it would be pointless. Fine. 3 days. But we do this properly. No cutting corners, no skipping safety protocols. Agreed. They shook on it. Karim's primary right hand grasping Gia's in what she assumed was the Praxian version of a binding agreement. His scales were cooler than she expected, smooth and dry. One more thing, Karim said as Gia turned to leave. The Council has monitoring systems throughout known space. If they detect us entering the Reach, they'll send interceptors. We'll be arrested, our ships impounded, and any evidence we find will be classified into oblivion. So we don't get detected. Easier said than done. Good thing I know a few tricks about avoiding official attention. Gia grinned, the expression feeling strange after hours of shock and grief. You stick to the science, I'll stick to the sneaking. The next 3 days passed in a blur of work, worry, and way too much coffee. Gia stripped the Mockingbird down to essentials, pulling out anything that added weight without adding function. The luxury passenger seating she'd installed for that one corporate contract? Gone. The decorative hull plating that had cost her 2 months' profit? Stripped and sold for scrap. Every gram mattered when you were trying to navigate gravitational anomalies that could crush a ship like an empty can. Karim arrived on the second day with equipment that looked expensive and probably was. Sensor upgrades, shielding generators, a navigation computer that he claimed could map spatial distortions in real time. He also brought supplies, food, water, medical kits, emergency beacons that might work if they got stranded. Gia didn't mention that emergency beacons wouldn't help them in a forbidden zone where no rescue ships would come. They worked mostly in silence, the kind of focused quiet that came from shared purpose. Occasionally, Karim would explain what he was installing, his 4 hands, moving with practiced precision. Gia learned more about gravitational lensing and sensor interference in 2 days than she'd learned in her entire career. On the 3rd day, as they ran final systems checks, Karim asked the question she'd been expecting. What if we find the installation and your father isn't there? Gia didn't look up from her pre-flight checklist. Then we find out what he was protecting, what was worth abandoning everything for. And if the Council intercepts us? They won't. You sound very confident. I'm a cargo hauler who's avoided customs inspections in 43 different systems. Trust me, I know how to stay off scanners. Karim made that air-escaping sound again, which Gia was starting to recognize as his version of nervous laughter. I've dedicated my life to careful research, peer-reviewed publications, and methodical analysis. Now, I'm about to commit multiple felonies with a smuggler. Legitimate cargo hauler, Gia corrected. The smuggling is just supplemental income. That doesn't make me feel better. It wasn't supposed to. Gia closed the checklist, looked at Karim directly. Last chance to back out. Once we launch, we're committed. Karim's scales shifted through several colors, finally settling on determined blue. I'm not backing out. I've been waiting my entire career for something real. This is real. Yeah. Gia powered up the engines, feeling the familiar rumble through the deck plates. Real and probably stupid. My favorite combination. The Mockingbird lifted off from Helix Prime at dawn, slipping into traffic lanes with dozens of other ships. Just another cargo hauler headed for another delivery run. Nobody noticed when they veered off the standard route. Nobody tracked them as they accelerated toward the outer rim, and nobody stopped them as they jumped to coordinates that didn't officially exist, heading for a region of space that wasn't supposed to have anything in it except death and darkness. Gia checked her father's locket one more time, the hawk and stars gleaming in the cockpit lights. Then she engaged the drive, and they jumped into the Umbral Reach. The Umbral Reach earned its name. Gia had flown through nebulas before, navigated asteroid fields, even threaded her way through the debris rings of a shattered moon. But this was different. This was space that didn't want them there. The viewport showed darkness so complete it felt like flying through ink. Occasionally, flashes of light erupted from nowhere, gravitational distortions bending starlight into impossible shapes. The ship's sensors screamed warnings every few minutes, detecting mass where no mass should exist, reporting spatial anomalies that violated basic physics. Korim sat at the secondary console, all four hands dancing across controls, his eyes glued to the navigation display. Adjust heading, 2 degrees port. There's a gravitational lens forming directly ahead. Gia made the correction, feeling the ship shudder as they skirted the edge of something that wanted to pull them into a dimensional blender. How much further? Difficult to say. The sensor readings are contradictory. According to this data, we're simultaneously 3 light hours away and already there. Korim's scales had gone pale gray, stress bleeding through his usual calm. Space-time is folded like origami in this region. That's not remotely comforting. It wasn't meant to be. They'd been in the Reach for 6 hours, and every minute felt like tempting physics to finally lose patience and crush them. The Mockingbird handled it better than Gia expected. The new shielding absorbing gravitational stresses that would have torn the hull apart otherwise, but she could hear things creaking that shouldn't creak, feel vibrations that made her teeth ache. Then the proximity alarm blared. Contact! Korim's voice jumped an octave. Automated defense platform bearing 280 Mark 15. It's powering weapons. Gia's hands flew over the controls, but she didn't run. Instead, she brought up the communications array, patched into the frequencies her father had used in his old military days. The codes were 16 years out of date, maybe useless, maybe worse than useless. She transmitted anyway. Unidentified platform. This is civilian vessel Mockingbird. Transmitting clearance code. Dumont 803 Victor 9. Request permission to proceed. Silence. The weapons charge continued building, energy signatures spiking on their sensors. Then, impossibly, a response. Not a voice, just a data burst. Authorization protocols, handshake confirmations, access granted. The weapons powered down. Korim stared at the display like it had just performed a magic trick. How did you... My father's old military codes. Gia's hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally catching up. I pulled them from his personal files, figured it was worth a shot. Those should have been deactivated years ago, decades ago. The fact that they still work means someone's still maintaining the system. Gia brought the ship forward, following the trajectory the platform had transmitted. Someone who knows those codes should still be valid. They flew deeper into the Reach, following automated beacons that activated as they approached. Breadcrumbs left by people who'd expected someone to follow. The darkness gradually lifted, revealing something that made both of them go silent. Bastion 9. The installation was built into an asteroid the size of a small moon, its surface dotted with docking bays, sensor arrays, and weapon emplacements that could probably vaporize a battleship. Lights glowed in some sections, minimal power but definitely active. This wasn't a ruin. This was a base on standby, waiting. The docking protocols activated automatically, pulling the Mockingbird into a landing bay with magnetic grapples. Atmosphere flooded the bay, life support systems coming online, like the station had been expecting visitors. Gia and Coram stood at the airlock, wearing emergency suits just in case. The station's atmosphere readings showed breathable air, Earth-normal pressure, but trusting readings had killed more people than outright disasters. The airlock opened. The interior was pristine. Clean corridors, functional lighting, everything maintained to military specifications. It looked like the crew had just stepped out for lunch and would be back any minute. But there was no crew. Just empty halls and the hum of life support. They explored for hours. Living quarters designed for thousands, all vacant. Command centers with stations for dozens of operators, all dark. Hydroponics bays capable of feeding a small city. Plants long dead, but systems still trying to grow them. Karim documented everything, his academic excitement warring with visible unease. This is incredible. The scale of this operation, the resources required. Humanity didn't just build a hidden outpost. You built a military infrastructure that rivals anything the Council has. Gia barely heard him. She was following instinct now, moving through the station like something was pulling her forward. Past crew quarters, past armories stocked with weapons she didn't recognize, past ready rooms and briefing halls, until she reached the central command core. The main computer was active, displays showing system status and power consumption. A single prompt glowed on the primary screen. Biometric authentication required. Gia placed her hand on the scanner. The system chimed. Dumont genetic markers recognized. Access granted. Welcome, Gia. The computer knew her name, had been waiting for her. Files cascaded across the displays, too many to process. Mission logs, personnel records, strategic assessments. And there, flagged for her specific attention, a personal message tagged with her father's credentials. She opened it. The holographic display activated, showing her father. Not the man she remembered from childhood, but older, harder. Wearing a uniform she'd never seen. A commander's insignia on his shoulder. The Dumont crest prominent on his chest. Gia. His voice was steady, but his eyes held profound sadness. If you're seeing this, something has gone wrong. Either I'm dead, or the protocols have failed, or you've come looking when you shouldn't have. Knowing you. Probably the last one. Despite everything, Gia almost smiled. He'd known her well. I need to tell you the truth. 120 years ago, humanity detected something at the edge of explored space. An intelligence. Ancient, predatory, consuming. We called it the hungering lattice. It eats civilizations, Gia. Devours them completely. Leaves nothing but silence. And it was coming toward the galactic core. Toward all of us. The hologram showed star charts, projections of something vast moving through space, leaving dead systems in its wake. The Galactic Council couldn't be trusted with this information. They would have panicked, turned on each other, collapsed into infighting while the lattice approached. So humanity made a choice. We would prepare in secret, build defenses in hidden space, become the guardians that nobody knew they needed. Project Bulwark, her father continued, dozens of installations like this one, scattered throughout unexplored regions, weapons development, strategic reserves, observation posts watching for the lattice's return. We've been here for over a century, generations of us, protecting a galaxy that doesn't know we exist. Gia felt her worldview shattering for the third time in as many days. My death was staged so I could join Bulwark full-time. The threat was real, Gia. I'm sorry I left you. I think about you every day. But if I hadn't, if we all hadn't— He paused, composing himself. The lattice came. 8 years ago, advanced scouts reached the outer installations. We stopped them, pushed them back, but the cost was high. The hologram flickered, and when her father spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. If you're seeing this, final protocols have activated. All personnel have been relocated to Bastion Prime, the primary stronghold. The coordinates are encrypted in your genetic profile. The computer will give them to you. But Gia, you need to understand. Joining Bulwark means leaving everything behind. Your old life ends. You become part of something bigger, something that can never be acknowledged. He leaned closer to the camera, and for a moment, he looked exactly like she remembered. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry. The choice is yours. The hologram ended. Gia stood motionless, Coram silent beside her. The computer chimed softly, displaying a single question. Access Bastion Prime coordinates? Before she could answer, the station's communication array activated. An incoming transmission, live and real-time. A woman's voice filled the command center, crisp and authoritative. Unidentified vessel. This is Commander Hicks at Bulwark Operations. We've been tracking your approach since you entered the Reach. Impressive navigation, by the way. Most people don't make it past the first gravitational lens. Gia found her voice. Commander Hicks, my name is Gia. I'm looking for information about my father, Lionel. A pause, longer than transmission lag would account for. Lionel was a good man, a good commander. I served with him for 6 years. Was? Another pause. I'm sorry, Gia. Lionel died 8 years ago defending Bastion 6 against Lattice incursion forces. He saved 4,000 people that day. Died a hero protecting billions, who will never know his name. The grief hit like a physical blow. Part of her had hoped, despite everything, that he might still be alive. That hope died now, finally and completely. But in its place, something else grew. Understanding, maybe. Or purpose. The lattice, Gia said. Is it still out there? Dormant, scattered, waiting. We pushed them back, but they're not gone. They're never truly gone. Which is why Bulwark continues. Why we need people willing to stand watch while everyone else sleeps safely. Gia looked at Coram. The curator's scales had cycled through every color in his emotional spectrum and settled on something like awe mixed with terror. I can't join you, Coram said quietly. I'm sorry, but this is too much. I'll return, falsify my research, bury the evidence. Because you're right. The truth would cause panic. Sometimes lies protect more than they harm. Hicks's voice softened. We understand, Dr. Coram. Thank you for bringing Gia to us. A transport will arrive within the hour to take you back to the Mockingbird. Coram looked at Gia. What will you do? She thought about her father, about the life he'd given up, about the boring cargo runs and meaningless days she'd been living for 16 years, about purpose and meaning, and doing something that mattered, even if nobody ever knew. I'm going to finish what he started.